Welcome to The Stacks, a podcast about books and the people who read them. I'm your host, Tracy Thomas. It's the Stacks Book Club day around these parts, and I am thrilled that Kiese Laymon is back to help us discuss Breathe, A Letter to My Sons by Imani Perry. This book is emotional, profound, and has so many layers that we peel back on today's discussion. There are no spoilers. Before we dive in, I wanted to give a quick shout out to our Patreon supporters, aka the Stacks Pack. These people have committed to a monthly contribution to the Stacks that allows me to make this show week in and week out. In exchange for their generosity, they earn perks like our virtual book club and more. Thank you to the following people who have joined the Stacks Pack. Please know that I could not make the show without all of you, and I'm so honored to have you in my corner. Keaton Bergston, Chris Brayton, Kimmy Laughlin, Emily Johnston, Becky Wheeler, Carolyn Strug, Michelle Claw, Megan, Hannah Ludwig, Julie Kelman, Leslie Rainier. Okay, last thing. Be sure to listen all the way to the end of today's episode to find out our August pick for the Stacks Book Club. All right, let's do it. Now my conversation with Kiese Laymon about Breathe by Imani Perry. All right, you guys, I am back again with Kiese Laymon, author, and we're going to talk about Breathe by Imani Perry for the Stacks Book Club. So Kiese, welcome back.
Hey, Tracy, I'm happy to be here again. Thank you for having me.
Me too. For people at home, we're going to be talking about Breathe in detail. There aren't really spoilers in this book, so if you have not read the book, you're going to probably be fine listening, but you should read this book because it is very, very good. Kiese, we always start at the same place for these book club conversations. What did you think of the book?
I was astounded by the book. As someone who knows Imani, who's read her five previous books, I'm gonna be honest. Like I didn't think anybody could pull off this book, and I didn't think Imani could pull off the book because, you know, like this is such a sensorium book. It's such a sensory book, and she's writing to two different young people while writing to an audience and us. And it was just a feat that I just had never seen anybody pull off. And because Imani to me seems like she's in some way like above like writing to younger people, which is strange. Like I just didn't know how she could pull it off. Really, I'm saying like I didn't realize she had this style in her repertoire, and she did. And so it was amazing. And again, she's writing to two sons. She's not writing to just one. She's writing to two, and she's writing to a third, which I would say, you know, us.
Right.
As a
right. Yeah. I was really blown away by this book. So I mean, I'll tell the listeners, originally when I reached out to you, it was before kind of like this movement for Black Lives is having this current moment. It was like a few days before, really. And I had suggested that we do Toni Morrison because we always do a Toni Morrison once a year on the show. And I thought, oh my God, that would be so great. Kiese Laymon's so smart. I think that would be awesome. And we had, you know, tentatively decided on maybe Song of Solomon. And then I signed into one of those Zoom, whatever, crowdcast chats between you and Imani Perry. And I immediately emailed you the next day and was like, look, I know we said we were going to do Song of Solomon, but I think we should do Breathe. And you were like, yes, let's do it. But I had not read the book yet. And I've never read anything. And I never read any books by Imani Perry. I'd read some essays by her and stuff, but I was familiar with her, but I hadn't read her work. And I was blown away by this book. I just thought it was such a surprise for me how good it was. And I'm often shocked when books are so moving and powerful that they don't receive the attention that I think that they should, especially as someone who's like in the book world, right? Like I understand if it's not a New York Times bestseller, you know, I understand if it's not competing with like Where the Crawdads Sing, right? Like I get that. Right. But like in the book space, I'm shocked that like I never heard from her publicist. I never there was no push, and this book just came out. And so I kind of was like, maybe it's not that good, or maybe like, you know, and then I read it and I'm like in the bathtub yelling to my husband, like, listen to this sentence. And, you know, I'm reading it while I'm feeding the boys. I'm reading it out loud to my boys just because they like when I read to them. Well, one of them does. And I just was like, I almost was annoyed that the book was so good because I was mad that it didn't get the love that I thought that it deserved. And that really frustrated me. Yeah. Like and so I'm even happier that we're doing it on the podcast because I'm like, this book needs to be read and it needs to be discussed. And, you know, one of the things that kind of popped into my mind, I was discussing it with another reader friend of mine, and that like it sort of is the companion piece, and I would argue slightly better, if that's such a thing, to Between the World and Me, right? Like it kind of is like if Between the World and Me could be written a few years later, it would, and it was coming from a mother, like, you know, these books kind of fit together really nicely. And I just really, really liked it. And I'm annoyed that I liked it so much, because I would have liked it not to be so good, so I could be like, yeah, well, that's why nobody's read it. But I don't understand why nobody's read it.
And she's so upfront about how Between the World and Me and other texts, like, you know, influenced her writing of the book, right?
Right.
Like it just says something about the world we're in, where people, and this is not at all a diss of me of Between the World and Me. It's a diss of something else that I'm not able to, like, you know, concretize in language right now. But like, if you read Between the World and Me, you must read Breathe.
Yes.
Like it's mandatory that you read Breathe. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And I actually think, real talk, I actually think Breathe will help people understand some of me, Between the World and Me, even more. Do you know what I mean? Like, and vice versa. But what she's taken on in that book, I mean, you have two kids, you have twins. Like, I've never even imagined writing two children before, because of that, like, weird, odd thing where, you know, you can have kids that come out and sort of treated the same way, and they're so different, but she gives voice to their differences too, right? Like, without just like fetishizing her children, like, you can feel the differences in those two kids, and I would argue that she uses different kinds of language, not just to describe them, but when directly addressing them differently. So to me, it's just like a literary fucking like marvel, and it makes me so angry that the rest of the world has not caught up with that book the way they need to. But there's still time, right?
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of time. Like, we live in this internet age, but you know, I think in the next few years, the rest of the world is going to catch up and realize that they and we need Breathe.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, saying like how she talks to them differently, or how she kind of addresses them and acknowledges their differences. There's that one part where she talks about their voices, and she says that Freeman's voice is low, and she says Issa's voice is still high, and she says it's swing low, sweet chariot. And I was like, yo, that's like the most beautiful.
Had me crying.
Yeah.
You asked me in an earlier podcast about the things that, like, I was sobbing, because you know why? Because I want my mom to be able to see, to like, I wish my mom had written that, just that graph about me, you know, just like, you know, there's somebody in the world who cares not just about your well-being, not just about like your success, not just about your safety, but like literally cares about the texture of your voice.
Right.
What?
Right. I know. It's just so beautiful. Are you familiar with Dani McClain? She wrote the book We Live for the We. Okay. So she was on this podcast last summer, and she mentioned this book as a book she was looking forward to reading, kind of in passing. Yeah. And I remember looking it up and being like, oh, that sounds nice. So this also is like kind of special for me, because I think Dani McClain is, I don't know, so profoundly brilliant. It's unbelievable. Another woman who I'm like, how are more people not talking about her book and her work? But she was right on. This book is totally in line with like this. I guess the conversation is like these books that are about Black mothering, you know, and like this very specific thing, which we're taught so much about indirectly, like through the media, right? We're taught so much about how Black men are incarcerated and killed and all this, and they're on drugs and all this stuff. And kind of indirectly, we're being taught about Black mothering, right? Like these single family homes and all this stuff that are led by the mother. And yet we don't have nearly enough texts about what it means to mother as a Black person, you know? And so I think
it is.
Because I think that people don't really, white people don't truly care about Black humanity, right? Like it's the Black pain that is the sexy thing. It's the Black,
Mhm.
hurt, and it's nice to be able to call Black people beasts and to lock them up and to watch them die and all this stuff. But when you have to actually look at the humanity of Blackness, right? And like, who are the people that foster that spirit that so many Black people talk about, which is like in the endurance that we have and the ability to, like we talked about last week, find the joy in shitty situations, like that comes from our mothers.
Yes.
And I mean,
Yeah.
my mom is white, so I don't have a Black mother, but I have Black mother figures, right? And like, I think I could also argue that my dad was also a Black mother, like he was older and he was a stay-at-home parent for me. He was my at-home parent, so he did a lot of Black mothering also. But I just think that line of like
Mm.
perseverance towards a joy is from Black motherhood. And I think that's not nearly as sexy to the outside eye, right? But I think I would argue for probably most Black people, that is the whole thing,
You know what's really like super mesmerizing about what you just said is like your father did a lot of the Black mothering, and but then I wonder like, could you, this isn't, I mean, it sounds like I'm directing this to you, but like, but can white mothers of Black children also do Black mothering, or
I
is that
think
something
so.
separate?
So
Yeah.
my mom obviously did a lot of mothering, right? But she doesn't necessarily have the experience of Blackness. But my dad was one of those like Black
Gotcha.
parents that really like would sit us down and talk about Black shit. Like I remember so many times like something would happen and I would get in trouble with like a group of my little white girlfriends from school, and he would be like, you can't be doing the same things that Helen can do, right? Or like, you can't be running around with those girls because you're going to get in trouble. And I remember very clearly not understanding it and being like, that's not fair. Like, we all put toilet paper or whatever the fuck we did. We all were putting soap on the ground in the bath, like dumb shit, like nothing real, like stupid sixth grade shit. But my dad was like always questioning race. And so my
Yeah.
mom definitely like, there was never a time that my mom ever made me feel like not proud of being Black or anything like that. But the actual Black pride that I feel came from my dad. And it didn't come until much, much later. Like, I would argue
Right.
probably not until I was 20, like in the last 10 to 15 years, did I even start to understand a lot of the stuff he was saying.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I mean, I think my mom probably does some of I'm sure she does some of the stuff of Black mothering, but it might just not feel like that because she is white too, like I
Right.
just might not think of it in that way.
Yeah, thank you for even. I always wanted to ask that question, not of you, but just of people. But I was always scared too. But and what Imani doesn't breathe is just like she makes something we know is expansive, right? Like Black mothering, though it is always disciplined and ignored, and you know just held to a standard that it shouldn't be held to. She somehow like makes mothering like and parenting like much more expansive than I ever imagined. Like there's this line in that book where she says you are second generation integrators.
Mm,
Like as a child or as a human or as a grown ass man now, like I just needed to hear that. Not
mm-hmm.
just from a mother, but from anyone who loved me, right? There's a directive in that sentence, right? Like you are second generation integrators. Like you're wondering who you are, you're wondering how you feel, you're into this, you're into that. Let me tell you one thing you are, right? I don't know. And there's so many sentences in there that are so declarative and cradling, but
Mm-hmm.
I think sometimes when we think about mothering, we only think about the cradling. And I just think that like she just does like an amazing job of cradling and being tender, but also giving her children directives that she is still in the midst of trying to follow herself. That's why it's
Right.
such a genius ass book, you know?
Right. Because you said there's like three people in the audience, right? The two sons and then us. And I think maybe four, maybe her too. Like a lot of it feels like she's saying it to herself, and being like,
Yeah.
let me just write this down. Because if I write it down, then it's true. And then I have to live by this too, or I have to appreciate this
Yes.
too. The other thing that I think is great that it's you that I get to talk about this book with, is because your book is also a letter to a family member, right? Like your book also is in conversation with Breathe because it is the letter from the son to the mother. And I'm just,
Right.
I mean, and then there are lots of books, like we mentioned, Between the World and Me, The Fire Next Time, like these books that are in this tradition of writing about life, and in all these cases, Black life,
Yep.
to a family member. Can you speak to that at all? Why that's important? Why that is a tradition that we have, that we see?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of reasons, but I just think the epistolary form for Black folks is so important, partially because white publishing has dictated that when we do speak or when we do talk, from slave narratives on, like the directive was like, we are talking to a white public with the intent of hoping this white public can see their humanity a little bit more and then grant us more humanity. So I think when we see text that like even gesture toward not doing that, right, like gesture toward the like internality of Black life, gesture toward like that intimacy that we know exists between us, I mean, I'm seduced by that shit, you know what I mean? But it can be done really poorly. Like another thing is like to say there are lots of these like epistolary books out there, like Dear Brother, Dear Son, Dear blah blah blah, that are not good books, right? Like it's a device. Like there's no specificity to the nephew or the niece or the son or blah blah blah. But Imani is not doing that shit. Like that's what's so incredible. Like if one does read her 5 previous books, it's just like, and they span, like, she's writing history, she's writing gender theory, she's writing hip hop, like culture and craft books. She's writing like biographies. And I just think when I read this book, I was like, oh shit, she had to write all of that to be able to do this. Do you know what I mean? So like what I feel is that I'm not at all saying Imani wasn't writing to us in those other books. I think she was, but I think that this book demands an intimacy, and what we see is that you can get that intimacy and not lose any rigor. You know what I'm saying? It's a rigorous, lush, loving book to me. Yeah. Like she's at one page she's talking about fucking Fortnite, and then she's talking about Emerson, and then she's talking about Tony K. Bambara. You know what I'm saying? This is the same motherfucking page. You know what I mean? Like that speaks to some sort of intimacy one has with the person to whom they're writing. And so that's one of the reasons that I'm so seduced by the direct address, is because Black folks, when we do talk, like we might start talking about like, the wonders of azaleas, and then we might be like, man, you know what? Speaking of Azalea Banks, you know what I'm saying? Like go off and start talking about banks. Like a motherfucker can't get no loan. You know what I'm saying? Like these are conversations that all like hold like the same like 20-second fucking space, but it's just hard to pull off in a book.
Right. No, that's so true. And she does the weaving of all of these different like strands so beautifully. Like it's not just like that she pulls from all these places, but the writing is like really pretty and like full and lush and juicy, and some of the sentences are like 2 words and some of the sentences are like 30 words, and like they're right next to each other, and the rhythm and the vibe, it just like from the start of the book I knew exactly where I was as a reader. And a lot of the times, I think maybe because I read a lot, the beginnings of books, sometimes I can't figure out, I can't get situated, right? Like I can't find myself. And this book, I picked it up and I was like, yo, like I'm here fully. And she takes like these personal little moments with her sons, and she takes these like big historic moments and she puts it all together. And the form is just like so good. Like it's just so good. It's annoying because I like to talk. Yeah. Like it's like, okay, so you're perfect. Congratulations.
And as a fucking like writer, fam, when I tell you she does some shit in this book, just like with language that you're not supposed to do, like there's a passage, and so one way to write this passage would be like, my children, comma, you have seen us, the adults in the world, right? She doesn't do that, right? She says, my children, period. That's a period. That
Right.
means the world. My children, period. You have seen us, the adults in your world, impotent to bring our lost ones back, to protect the children or the mothers or the fathers, or even avenge their deaths, as useless as retribution would be when it comes to broken hearts. Like, that's just like audacious. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
just like with the punctuation, that's the same shit you see in Baldwin, ill ass punctuation. But again, it makes me feel like if the book wasn't gonna be like pushed tremendously when it came out, it just seems like beyond all the other shit about what she's doing so beautifully, writers were supposed to read this book and be like, oh, this motherfucker right here is on some other shit. Cause that's how I
Right.
felt, you
Right.
know?
Right. Yeah. See, I'm not a writer, so I don't ever think about reading as a writer. I always think about reading as a reader.
Hmm.
I don't write. Like I don't like it. I'm not good at it. I like to read. Like reading is my jam. Yeah, I love reading. I don't like writing, and I've never liked
That's
writing.
amazing.
Yeah, I don't read. I don't
Cause
read
you,
to
cause you,
write.
cause you talk, you ask questions like, well, you ask questions like you, but you ask questions like someone who's tried to fuck with this language and like tried and failed and succeeded, tried and failed, succeeded.
No, I mean, I
But I guess,
went to theater school. Like I have an arts background. I was a dancer. Like so, I'm definitely a creative. And I think maybe that's
yes,
where it comes from. Like I have an appreciation for the process. I have an
gotcha.
appreciation for like doing the work, but I don't writing is not my medium at all. Like I'm not interested in writing, though I'm interested in other people's writing, and creation. So I feel like we have to talk about this book in this moment that we read it, right?
Yeah.
Because this book came out last fall 2019,
Yeah.
and I read it this past week, which is, everything's starting to settle around the George Floyd, Breonna Taylor. Not that people have stopped at all, but just like we're starting to try to make sense of what just happened 2 or 3 weeks
Yeah.
ago. And one of the things that I found to be so jarring in reading this book is like, she didn't write it this week, right? Like this, and she could have written it
Man.
5 years ago and it still would have been just as relevant. But, she's talking about injustice and she's talking about kids getting murdered by the police and she's talking about all of this stuff that, I mean, I don't know if there was a better week to pick up this book for me. And she didn't write this book with this week in mind. And so I don't know. I always think about this when I read things that feel very topical in the moment because obviously none of it is new. And yet still it kind of takes your breath away because it
Yes.
feels like she knew. I don't know. I don't know what the question is.
She knew. I mean, and I'm the wrong person, right? Because Imani Perry is the reason I'm talking to you right now. You know what I
Hmm.
mean? Like if I don't meet and read Imani Perry, like I don't know. I don't know. I couldn't have written. I mean, I wouldn't have tried to write some of the things that I've written, but she knew. And then like there's that section in Breathe when she's talking about their play uncle Byron, right?
Mm,
And she calls me like her play cousin, Imani does, and she's my play cousin. And ultimately, like Byron dies, and she's trying to talk about like these lineages and these connections that we have that are ancestral and blood, even if they're not through blood. And I think that's so much of what some of us feel right now when we think about Breonna Taylor, when we think about when we see what happened to George Floyd. Like I didn't know that actual human, but like that dude was my uncle. He was my
mm-hmm.
fucking uncle, and he was my play cousin, and he was me. You know what I'm saying? Black motherfucker out here, got 3 or 4 jobs, trying to make it, and then at the end of the day, getting murdered in fucking
Right.
front of the world, and then begging for your mama, or a play niece in Breonna Taylor, who you worked your ass off all day trying to save people. You trying to get that good sleep, which is hard for all people, and
Mm-hmm.
particularly is hard for black folks. And then you come get fucking murdered in your sleep. And so I think if we understand that there is an ancestral connection, I think it's what Imani is saying, and that Brianna is our play cousin. our play niece, and that George Floyd is their play uncle or play cousin, it helps explain more of why at this point finally we all are just saying, nah, you ain't gonna kill no more of our family. That's what I think Imani's actually saying in this book. You know what I mean? Without saying it explicitly.
Right.
Because you've done so much. You've killed so many of them. You don't get to kill no more of our cousins, our play cousins. You know, like no, nope, not anymore, because we want to breathe. Right.
And then she complicates that though by talking about how it's easy to feel like, oh, this person could have been my child or could have been my cousin or could have been my whatever, but it's not. And that we can't let our own egos as Black people to like center our own fear and grief when the pain that the actual family members of people like Breonna Taylor and George Floyd or Trayvon Martin or Michael Brown or Ahmaud Arbery, like, you mean the list I could go for, Emmett Till, anybody, that the pain is really that of their families, and it really is their own pain and their own grief to bear, and that we can't let our own imaginations take away from people's actual grief. And I mean, that to me was also really mind blowing, right? Because we have that moment of Obama saying, if I had a son, he would have looked a lot like Trayvon Martin, right? And like, that's a hugely powerful moment in one hand. And then also that takes away from Sabrina Fulton's experience, right? Like, and it's just, I mean, that was really jarring for me, because she also then calls on us the thoughts of our own self in these situations, our imagination should not take away from our collective outrage and grief, but also that those aren't it's not our grief at all, like that we're not experiencing it. And that was like, yo, because that's the same shit that like white people do to us, right? Like, I'm sure I've got to assume that you've been getting phone calls or texts from white people that being like, how are you? I can't imagine. It must be so hard to be Black, or like, you must be, maybe not those exact words, but like, oh, it must be so hard. Are you hanging in there? All this stuff. And it's like, this isn't your grief. Like, you can imagine what it might be like, but this is
So true. Right. Yes, and that is Imani, right? Like, it's like where I or like, another normal person would stop the argument. Like, she continues the argument. Like, she continues the argument, and would argue that continuance of the argument is part of the inheritance of what we have to do. So yes, at once these deaths become spectacular and titillating and shit, and we can galvanize behind them. But as you say, we got to fucking make room for the motherfuckers who actually know how George Floyd smelled.
Right.
Like we can't allow the titillating spectacle to overpower the actual fucking relationship that this man had to human beings in the world, because that's what officers at their worst, teachers at their worst, Americans at their worst do to us every day. Right? Like, I have to believe if they thought that we were like connected in these loving, intimate ways to other human beings, like, they wouldn't do it. I mean, that's me being hopeful, but yeah, that's a great point. I'm so glad you brought. Yeah, that's right. She doesn't just stop there. She keeps
going. Valentine's Day is upon us, and I've got love on the brain. Love for books. Duh, of course. Hello. Did you forget what podcast you're listening to? I love bringing you all great reads, exclusive author interviews, and behind the scenes book gossip. But I can only do that with your support over on Patreon and Substack. Our Stacks Patreon community, also known as the Stacks Pack, is where you can go for book club meetups, a private, very active Discord, and a year-long mega reading challenge to help you achieve all your reading goals. Plus, you also get that monthly bonus episode. Now, over on the Substack, you can subscribe to my newsletter, Unstacked, where I keep the book conversations going. I also give you a healthy dose of sports and pop culture, definitely some hot takes happening over there. And again, that bonus episode. If you don't have a few dollars to spare, don't worry. There are free options on the Substack and the Patreon to get you a little extra Stacks magic. Making this podcast is a total team effort, and by supporting my Patreon and my Substack, you allow me to support my amazing team that makes the show possible every single week. So if you or your friends are looking to meet other book lovers and support this indie podcast, come hang out with me on Patreon, Substack, or both. I would love to have you. And since we're talking about love, you can gift subscriptions to the Patreon and the Substack for that special reader in your life. For the Stacks Pack, head to patreon.com/thestacks. And for the newsletter, head to tracythomas.substack.com. And also, there are links to both in the show notes. Okay, see you in the Stacks. I mean, that's the whole book. It's like everything she says, she complicates. Like she says something and you're like, yes, oh my God, totally 100% that. And then she complicates it and you're like, yeah, also 100% that. Like, and they're two conflicting ideas, and somehow they're both true and real and correct. They're both yeses.
Yes.
Yeah.
You know, reading the book, I don't know about you, but like, and this isn't a diss of my mom at all. It's just it forces you to think about what being parented by someone who's able to write, breathe, what is like.
Yeah.
Do you know what I'm saying? Because
Yes.
because you know, like that's the thing I've never, like, I wanted to talk about that in that conversation the other day, but we didn't get a chance to because we were talking about all the other shit. But like I'm interested in what it means to, like, for her to parent her two sons, but also when those boys are older, like I wanna talk, because you know they're kids, right? Like, kids get into shit, kids do shit,
Right.
and black kids are gonna get punished from the state disproportionately more harmful than kids who are not than white kids, but they kids. And so, like, I just wonder, like, because I think I can imagine what it feels like. Because Imani is not writing this shit as a perfect parent. You know what I'm saying? She's not writing this shit as like a stiff ass intellect. Like, I can see her dancing with her kids. I can see her laughing at jokes. I can see them doing that. Oh, mama, please, not now.
Right.
You know, I can see them doing all the things that parents do. But I also wonder what it's like to be raised by a parent who is so committed to, among other things, being a loving parent.
Right.
And that probably says a lot about my life, but like, I just wonder what that's like.
Well, and also, I mean, she has the skill set to write about it. Like, I'm sure a lot of parents think about it and have their own philosophies and, like, you know, lose sleep about it, but that she could actually write about it, you know, like put it down on paper. Because I mean, I have been obviously thinking a lot about what it means to be a parent and having to, I mean, my husband is white, so my kids are very fair skinned. And so I have a lot of anxiety about this because for me, I'm worried that I have to, if they decide that they identify as male, right, and that they want to live as male, I have this potential of having two cis het white looking boys, but they're not white, you know? And like, so I've been thinking a lot about that, but I could never write about that in the way that she does, you know? So like, my kids may never know what I'm grappling with right now and probably for the rest of my life, that stuff is like somehow stuck inside of me in a way that they won't, that I wish I could put it down on paper. Like, I wish Imani Perry could come in my brain and then write it for me so that they could know.
And when you read Breathe, your twins were already born, right?
Yeah, I just read it last week. So yeah, they were like 6 months old.
So did it, and this might be too personal, but like, did it, and if it is, whatever, edit the shit out. Okay. But like, did it make you feel like a different kind of joy and or fear about the parenting of those two twins than you had before?
Yes. And it some of it kind of like reinforced things I'd been thinking about, like justice, because she talks about how, and fairness, how kids understand fairness and love better than adults, like that's something that they just inherently understand. And so that's something I've been thinking a lot about. You know, we took the boys to two protests already, you know, and it was important to me to go, even though, you know, my anxiety around the pandemic has been very, very high. I just said, we have to go because I need to be able to say to these babies in 5 years or 25 years, yeah, no, we were there and we took you and you were there. And it was important enough to go outside and be among people in a pandemic because, you know, like, so that sort of thing kind of reinforced. But then I think I'm also terrified of what it means to raise two boys right now who, I mean, I don't know. Thankfully, I think they have a little color to them. So I'm hoping at least people will be like, you got something. Like, I think people will be like, what are you? Which I get all the time, which is, don't ever say that to someone. What a fucking idiotic thing to say. But I'm hopeful that people won't just assume that they're white. But I have a lot of fear. And this book just, you know, I could feel that in her too, that she is also scared of being a mom in some ways. And not necessarily being a mom, but being a mom in the world, right? Like if she could keep them safe in her house at all times, I think she probably wouldn't have fear. But I think it's like the second you open the door, it's like, what is this?
And when she makes that distinction between, you know, I want to say something to y'all that I hope you can understand. You know, like, I'm not sure white people are redeemable, and I don't want you to love white people. But she's saying this does not mean I don't want you to have loving relationships with particular white people. But as a whole, but she's like, but I'm afraid of like living in a world, and y'all living in a world where white people are not redeemable. And she does it so deftly, but like, I'm sure you can feel that in like a differently deep way, but I felt that shit in my chest. Right. You know, like I was like, oh shit, you know, like, because she's not saying don't fall in love with somebody white or, you know, don't have white best friends, but don't invest yourself in this notion of white people being what white people think they are. Right. And because I don't think that there's a part of me that wonders if white folks will forever believe that about themselves in mass in this nation, and not just period, but it scares me. I just think that says so much. Yeah, no, I mean, that part was definitely, I felt that as well. I mean, because it's like, you know, for me specifically, like I am as much black as I am white. And I think like genetically, right? Or like not genetic, I guess we're all the same, but like, you know, my mom is white and my dad is black, and that's just what it is. And so there is definitely a struggle there for me personally, because she's saying you can love white people, individual white people, but like the collective idea of whiteness and like what it means to be white, and I ultimately white supremacy, I think, right? That we can't, we have to not love that. And that's hard, because that also, you know, courses through my veins, right? Like I have very much white blood in my body as much as I have black blood. And just because, you know, other people don't see that when they see me necessarily. I mean, I think I think I look mixed, you know, like I think that I very much look like a mix of my dad and my mom, you know, like my skin, you know, all that stuff. But I am always like, I'll tell you this story. So someone sent an email to me or something, and they were asking me about a book, and they wanted to know what I thought about the book as a non-white person. And I was deeply offended by that, because I'm actually not non-white. And that, like, I didn't like being defined that way. And I'd never really thought about it before. But for whatever reason, when they asked me, like, I'm just curious what non-white people, like what a non-white person would think about this book. I was like, well, first of all, fuck you. Like even if you see me as black or not white, I actually am white, you know, like that is a part of who I am. And it's a big part of who I am, you know, so I definitely like took a few minutes on that section of the book, because whiteness is been horrible and violent and done so many terrible things to so many black people in this country. And yet still I grapple with with that white guilt, in addition to like the pride I have in being black. And I think that's going to be even more so for my sons. Yes. And when you said that, it's like, I almost forgot that, you know, there's a portion in the book where she says, you know, like, I was raised by a Jewish father, right?
Right.
Like a Jewish communist father.
Right.
And this man who looks phenotypically white, she's like, that's my father, and he was a revolutionary, right?
Right.
Which says, and she uses those words to talk about a bit about like who, like another part of not just her lineage, but the lineage of her son. So I don't know. I just think like she does this incredible job of talking to these two black sons about this complicated, radical revolutionary lineage that also has some Jewish communist underpinnings as well. Do you know what I
Right.
mean?
Let me ask you
Right.
this. So I feel like the thing that we're kind of grappling with is like the idea of whiteness, like as a big thing, like the collective whiteness versus individual white people. And we're kind of struggling, and Imani Perry struggles with it in the book. But then when I think about white people talking about black people, it's so easy for white people to be like, but I have a black friend, or my cousin's black. And they can so easily do this thing that we can't seem to do, which is like hate black people or be afraid of black people, but still be able to love an individual black person. And like, that's something they're super proud of, right? Like, I did call the cops on this black kid for selling lemonade, but also my niece is black, right?
Yeah. Yes.
And I don't know why we can't do that. Like, why it's so hard. I mean, we can, but I don't know why it's so hard for us to be able to not like the collective white, but be able to love the individual white.
I mean, there are a lot of things that I think about that. Like, why is it so hard? And then what do we do with like the anti-black sometimes inclinations that some of us have, right? That are like sometimes find value in things that are not just white, but find value in like ideas and traditions that are not black too. I don't know. I just think she does a great job of like talking about anti-blackness as a thing that really exists, but then, just perpetually saying over and over in this book in different words that we are more than the depth of our wounds. And I think when people hear that line, we are more than the depth of our wounds, I think people hear that shit as like simplistic, but the more is like what I'm interested in, because I think that's tied to your question. I think we can do what you just said because we are more. Like, I'm not trying to be like we're superior and all of that shit, but like we have had to be more, and we are more than like
Right.
these like singular entities, and more than like the depth of these wounds, and more than just like joyful black folks, and more than like anti-black folks. Like there's like a cacophony of like all of this shit. And I hear it. I can hear it when I see somebody. When you sent me the email the first time, I could see it I could hear it in the text, even though the fucking, text couldn't talk. You know what I mean? Like there's a more.
Right.
In the worst parts of whiteness, I just think attempt either through conservative means or neoliberal means to like smash that more down into shit that is not abundant. But fuck that shit. Like we are
Right.
abundantly fucking like all of this shit. You
Right.
know?
Right. Yeah. No, I do know. That's so right. There's a podcast called Seen on Radio, and they have a series on whiteness, and it's incredible. And it's this guy, John Bwin, and then he brings in, I don't know if you are familiar with Chandrai Komanika, but he's
Yes.
okay. So Chandrai is on the podcast as kind of like, he comes in to like help John work through discovering that white people have done all these terrible things. And one of the questions that Chandrai asks is, when was whiteness good? Because they talk about how whiteness was created to basically legitimize slavery. And I think that that's also, I think part of it for black people is like, it's hard to separate what it means to be white from what it means to be white. Why there is white.
Right.
Like, and so I've been thinking about, I listened to the podcast when it first came out a few years ago, and then I listened to it again earlier this month, just for shits and giggles, just to be reminded about, the history of race in America. And now I can't stop thinking about, when was whiteness good,
Damn. I think the converse to that question is, if we can't think about when whiteness was good, and I usually don't invest in these like origin narratives where it's like, we got to get back to our good origins. I don't care whoever says that shit. I think origins are often
right,
messy too. But the converse to that question is like, if we can't think about when whiteness was good, And I think Baldwin would say no to this question, like, can whiteness be good?
Right.
I don't think I like my answer to that question, but what do you think?
I feel like the answer to that question is not something that is a fun thing to think about.
Okay. Okay.
I mean, I struggle with this, because I, I struggle with this, and also, I think I should say it. My mom will probably get mad if I don't mention this, and my aunt, who both listen. Like, the white in my family is they're Jewish immigrants from Russia, right? So like, I don't come from a line of American whiteness, right? And I think, even me having to say that is like the stupid disclaimer, because of course they benefited from being white, even if they also experienced diversity for being Jewish. But I think that part of that is like how I can feel okay at night, And I don't think about the whiteness that comes from my dad's side. My dad's side is Creole, So like, there's some other shit going on, and like, I know, unfortunately, I don't have like the history of my dad's family past my grandma. Like, I don't know any ancestry past that. But my assumption is that if there are Black people from Louisiana, my last name is Thomas, that, there was some slavery going on, and my grandmother was pretty fair. And so, I could draw the lines there, but I've tried to look it up, and then I also haven't tried hard enough because I don't really want to know.
I feel you. Yeah.
Like, it's tricky.
Yeah. And I think that question is so much deeper than, just to reiterate again, because I think it's important, than like, can people who are phenotypically white, be good or redeemable? That's not what we're asking right now.
Right. It's not about individuals.
Right. It's like, can whiteness be good in this nation? I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know either. I mean, we kind of touched on this last week, but I'm curious if you could go, or last time, a little bit deeper about, do you remember there being a shift in your own relationship to being Black or your own work when Heavy kind of got a lot of notoriety and attention, and like white people started to value your work in a new way? Do you remember if that shifted how you thought about yourself or how you dealt with your writing?
Yeah, it's just so tightly wound, right? So, you have to, Heavy comes into the world because nobody in the world will publish How to Slowly Kill Yourself and Others or Long Division. So I have to go to independent press called Agate and pretty much give the books away for the books to come into the world. Now, the independent press called Agate is run by a white man, right? This white man puts those books out in ways that I thought they shouldn't have been put out. And then I go on the road. I become my publicist. I'm my editor, and I sell 50,000 books pretty much out of the trunk of my car. And I'm using these essays to bring people to my work. And then, I start to get a pick of agents that I could work with, and the agent that was the most like soulful and like effective to me was another white brother, PJ Mark, right? And then because my sister Jesmyn Ward worked with Kathy Belden, the brilliant Kathy Belden, who was a white editor at Bloomsbury, I'm like, yo, if you get Mississippi Jesmyn, you might get Mississippi me. So then I work with her, another brilliant white person. And then when I work from there, I get two brilliant white publicists. So before my shit is even out into the world, it's gone through like 6 different white people's hands. You see what I'm saying? And so I was prepared for white people to like, have something to say about my work, but I wasn't prepared to do shit like win the Carnegie Award for nonfiction. Like, one, because Carnegie was a fucking eugenicist and racist as fuck. Also, because like, I just did not think that like that book I wrote would win that award. And we're talking honestly here now. Like, I knew I wrote one of the best books of the year. I'm not gonna front. I read a lot of shit. I know it. I knew it. I was surprised that I mean, this is the first time I've ever said this, and I probably shouldn't say it. I was surprised I didn't win some other shit, but I was very surprised that I won the Carnegie Medal because of the history of Andrew Carnegie. And so when white folks, not just eugenicist white folks, but white folks started to value some of the stuff that I did, it did make me feel a little weird. But I think the flip of this conversation is Black folks and Latinx folks really love that shit. Do you know what I'm trying to say? There's just less of us. Do you know what I mean? Like, so if I wrote a book that did not get like adoration or love or critical engagement from Black folks, but got only that from white people, I'd be fucked up right now. The kind of person I am, I would be, and I'm already fucked up, but I'd be more fucked up. So it helped that, you know, like the white folks could see some value in it. You know, I still am wondering like what they see and blah, 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 blah. But, you know, I get it. You write about the body from the position of a cis, you know, het Black man. A lot of white women are going to be like, oh, you're writing about the body in ways that I feel too. You know that's going to happen. But just like the valuing of it, I did not expect that. But whatever weirdness I feel from that is always countered by the fact that like a lot of Black people fuck with heavy. And I worried about that because what I'm doing in heavy is doing some shit that Black people are told not to do, which is to keep all them secrets in house, you know? And I'm not telling all the secrets at all, but it appears that I am. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
So anyway, that's a great question. But like, I just think if I hadn't gotten any care and attention, like, you know, like if you didn't want to talk to me, you know what I'm saying? Or if Imani didn't like my book, but Time Magazine did and some other people and Andrew Carnegie motherfuckers and, you know, the Isherwood and all these prizes and shit, I'd be like, oh, yo, I am not at all who I think I am. But the fact that those people felt it, but then the, you know, Black folks who I do love and value and trust also critically felt it, that kind of made me feel okay about it.
Right. So because that was your audience, like you write for us and about us.
I mean, and I do, but you know, we're always aware. It's like when you do this podcast, you know what I'm saying? Like, you know, we are it's a part of that abundance. When like it's that more that Imani is talking about. Like we are aware that like there's a primary audience, there's a secondary audience, and then there's like the other audience. Like we're always aware when we get on these mics that like white folk might be watching. The question is like, do we cater to that gaze? And I think that's the third question. The first question is like how intent and having a loving conversation with the Black person who I'm engaging with and the audience to whom I care, who's giving me the most. Do you know what I'm saying? So I'm not trying to have like right in white people. Like we all know white motherfuckers out here listening, but that doesn't mean that I have to cater to them. You know, the question is like, how do I cater to the people who have made, and in my life, the people who have made me happen to be primarily Black Southerners, you know, of which Imani is one. You know what I'm saying? But I'm wholly aware that, like, you know, the president of my fucking school, you know, at some point is going to know that book is out in the world. And, you know, so are all of these, you know, white teachers who told me I wouldn't be shit. But I'm not about to waste my ink writing to them to redeem myself. Because I know I come from people that are connected to you, connected to Imani, connected to Regina Bradley, connected to Andrea Robinson, connected to Derek Harrell. Do you know what I mean? So I think it's a lot more complicated when we talk about audience than sometimes I want to believe.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it's more complicated. I think all the good stuff and the bad stuff is more complicated than we want it to be because it's like, it's overwhelming. Like, I feel like we could talk about this for 6 hours and feel like we got nowhere, you know, or not that we got nowhere, but just that like there's still so much more to talk about. We of course are running out of time. There's one thing that I feel like we have to talk about before we wrap up, which is, you know, she talks a little bit about how she's made some mistakes and that her thinking is flawed, and that especially when it comes to kind of like maleness and like how she raised her boys, and, you know, she gave them a doll so that they would nurture, but that, you know, she didn't really go there, and you know, her relationship with religion, and it reminds me that part of the book, her talking about her mistakes that she's made, it reminded me a lot of Malcolm X, because I feel like he's the most famous, at least to me, or the most important to me, Black person who has publicly made mistakes and changed their thinking in such a public way. And it's profound to see someone say just flat out, I did this thing, I thought it was right. It was wrong. Like, that is just what? People don't do that. And like, it doesn't take away the things that she says that she's done wrong. It doesn't change any of that, that is where she was or where she is, but it makes it meaningful.
And it's the bedrock of what we talked about in the earlier podcast of education, which
Right.
is always about revision, right?
Mm.
It is impossible to educate oneself if you're constantly looking back and never seeing that you made a mistake, or if you're always like, well, if I hadn't made that mistake, I wouldn't be, you know what I mean? Like you
Right.
like Imani is literally like embodying like radical education in this book by
Mm.
showing us that she, as like, you know, the eminent educator, professor, writer in the world, fucked up, is trying to learn from those fuck ups. And she is not saying that, like, at this point, I have learned. She's saying at this point, I am in the process of continuing to learn. And that's
Right.
what, I mean, I'm a cornball fan, but like, that's what we have to have. Like, that's what we need. We have to have learning in the service of radical, loving education. And we have to put that shit, like, we have to, like, not burden our children with that, but we have to, like, convey that to our children. Like, it's crucial that our kids be able to look back, our 14-year-olds be able to look back when they were 8 and be like, oh shit, I made that mistake when I was 8, and now let me revise that thought or feeling, you know,
Right.
and that, you know, and that's one of the reasons you asked me in a previous podcast why I would have Donald Trump read this book, is because I think he and the people who made him are examples of how, like, stunted education can be when you don't
Mm.
really believe in education or revision. And this book is not about Donald Trump, thank God. It's about so many things that are much more profound and loving. But I just think she gives us a model of how to be better lovers, better children, better parents, and better
Right.
people. But it has to have radical revision and education at its center, or it ain't worth a damn.
Right. And it's not defensive at all.
At all.
You know, she's not defensive. I mean, she even says culture isn't a word that should work as a defense. And like, it's right, because so often when we make mistakes, when we say something, you know, I often use like trans folks as an example, because I think that I definitely was all fucked up on that 10 years ago, 5 years ago. I mean, even yesterday, you know, like, I'm still learning so much about it, but like, to just be able to say that, and to, like, she gives us permission to be like, we were fucked up about this shit, and not have to try to defend it. Everybody knows the whole country was bad on trans rights 5 years ago, but you know, I can just say I was bad on trans rights without having to, like, to blame someone else, or to, you know, that to me is like really radical and revolutionary and transformative as I continue to try to learn and grow.
Yeah.
And like, for young people to see that. I mean, she mentions Jim, who worked with her father, and he likes men, and her father is basically like, yeah, do you know what a gay person is? And she's like, no. And she's like, well, people who like men who like other men, and some people will treat them differently, and that's wrong. And like, the end. Like, that's how we teach our kids. Like, it's so simple, and we make it so hard. And I just appreciate her kind of like showing that as an example of like how to do right, you know?
And how young people are actually educating us.
Right.
That's the other subtext I got in this text.
Right.
It's like young people, her boys are educating her about so many things as she goes on. You know, when I was a kid, I hope my mama didn't mind me saying this, but I was like 13, and my mom was talking about one of her colleagues who was bisexual, and I was just like, okay, so what? And my mom was like, Key, that means that person's having sex with 2 people at the same time. And I was 13, right? Now I'm my mama's child. I read a lot. I'm like, mama, bisexual does not mean that. She said, Key, that is what it means. And I'm like, mama, that is not what it, you know what I mean? So like at that moment, I'm teaching my mama something. Whether she heard it or not is another question. But I just love how Imani also is not just showing how she's a perpetual student of the world and student of liberation, but she's also a perpetual student of her own children, who are her primary students. I don't know. I just love this book. I just wish every human being on earth would read it. I think we'd be in a better place.
Yeah, I'm with you. Okay, the last thing we always talk about is title and cover. I think there's only one cover. I don't even know if it's come out in paperback at all, but it's like purple and yellow and red and kind of swirly and like arty and like really pretty and has white writing. The whole title is Breathe, a Letter to My Sons. I'm just super into this whole book. Like, I'm into the packaging, though I don't know that the packaging necessarily like lets you know what's inside of it. I still am drawn to it. I think it's really beautiful, and it feels like warm and cold, and it feels like substantive, but also not like, it's not like two little boys or like a photograph. It's just it's not literal, and it's not, I'm drawn to the way that this book looks. And the title Breathe, I mean, it's so simple and it works because it's also, of course, complicated. And I think in this moment, when we're talking about I can't breathe again, because this isn't the first time we've talked about I can't breathe. Let's not forget. Which is like, that's the thing that's so fucked up, right? That like George Floyd's tagline, right? This I can't breathe tagline, if you will, is the same shit from Eric Garner.
Yeah.
Like, it's becoming, the murder of Black men is becoming, and women and trans people, is becoming so redundant that we're recycling fucking last words.
Yeah. And Imani anticipated that because she understands the lineage from which we come. And in some way, with all these fucking weird how-tos out there, the shit to me that is so American is that with all these people in this world literally not being able to breathe because we all have to wear masks, not being able to breathe because fucking motherfucking cops have knees in people's necks, not being able to breathe because cops come in there and shoot you in your sleep. Imani, in some way, is giving us a complicated, complex, intertextual example of how we can get better at breathing. And if that shit is not on everybody's list to read in this moment and the next moment and the next movement and the next movement, I just think the list is suspect. You know what I'm saying? Like, this is the book. This is the book we all need to be reading as humans, but definitely as Americans right now. Breathe.
Well, shit, we're going to end on that. Kiese, thank you so much for being here. This has been like just a dream come true. So thank you for taking the time and for talking with me.
I'm so thankful that you had me, and thank you so much for giving our books like so much care and being rigorous. That's a big deal and fun. Thank you.
Thank you. And everybody else. Oh, I have to tell you guys what we're reading next month. Okay, I can't tell you who we're reading it with, but because Kiese and I switched up the book, I had to get another person to do Toni Morrison with me, and the person is very good. I won't tell you who it is, but we're going to do Sula in August. So get your copies of Sula. That will be the last week of August. Kiese, thank you for being here. And everybody else, we will see you in the stacks. All right, that does it for us today. Thank you all so much for listening. And thank you to Kiese Laymon for being our guest. As you heard, our Stacks Book Club pick for August is Sula by Toni Morrison, which we will be discussing on August 26th. Find everything we discussed on today's episode in the link in the show notes. And for more from The Stacks, follow us on social media at The Stacks Pod on Instagram and at The Stacks Pod _ on Twitter. And check out our website, thestackspodcast.com. To join the Stacks Pack and support this show, head over to patreon.com/thestacks. Make sure you're subscribed to the show wherever you get your podcasts. And if you're listening through Apple Podcasts, please take a moment to rate and review this show. Our graphic designer is Robin McCrite, and our theme music is from Tigirigis. This show was edited and mixed by Will Sterling and created and produced by me, Tracy Thomas.